We are just 67 games away from declaring a new national champion. Duke won last year. A 38-0 Kentucky team suffered the first loss at the Final Four. Many Cinderella stories emerged, top teams losing to small schools. We've got 68 teams who only have one shot at glory. Lose, you go home. Welcome to Bracket Breakdown on LTTV. I'm your host, Max Abrahamson. Now we're going to go over the first four. These four games will be played in Dayton. Most of these teams are the bottom seeds, or they're the last teams into the tournament. I'm here with Luke Lusson and Nick Jacobs. Luke, give me some insight on the Vanderbilt against Wichita State game.
Yeah, Max, I'm looking for Wichita State to win this one for sure. Finished with a regular season record of 24-8, had a rough start, but kind of got going from there. People kind of forgot about this team, but don't forget some of those big runs they've made in the tournament in the past, so I expect them to win this one for sure.
Nick?
I think the same thing. I think that Wichita State will be able to pull this one off with some ease. They have Fred VanVleet coming off an injury. He's been their star player since he joined the team a few years back, and I think that it'll be a pretty easy win for Wichita State.
Vandy does have some talent though. They've got Wade Baldwin, the fourth, a pro-level guard with some upside. He's going to require double teams. And of course, the Shockers, they did not win their MVC conference championship. UNI did. They've got Ron Baker, who can score at will, basically. And they're only 4-7 against the top 100. So we haven't seen them play really high level of competition, but Vandy's not a high-level team. All right, let's move on to the second game tonight. We've got FGCU against Fairleigh Dickinson. Luke, give me some insight.
Yeah, I like Florida Gulf Coast in this one, Max. Atlantic Sun champions this year, finished with a regular season record of 20-13. They made a big run a couple years back, obviously beating Georgetown, so I expect them to do the same here and win this one.
Nick?
I agree with Luke here again. I think that FGCU is a very strong team. You know that they have some size. They play very good defense, even against the fast-paced Fairleigh Dickinson team.
Yeah, Fairleigh Dickinson. Player to watch, Earl Potts Jr. Funky game and funky hair in a good way. Very creative as a guard. And of course, one of the best characters in college basketball, Coach Greg Herenda. So maybe he'll provide a little bit of spark to Dayton tonight, 2-16 team. The third game of the first four, we've got Holy Cross against Southern. Luke, give us some insight on this game.
Max, I like Southern in this matchup. Finished with a regular season record of 22-12. I expect them to take this one home and advance to play a 1 seed.
Nick?
I think the same thing. Holy Cross standing at 14-19. They did win their conference tournament, but they have a losing record, so I really don't think that they have any chance of beating Southern in this one.
They're a hot team coming in. They beat Loyola Maryland, Bucknell, the number 1 seed, Army and Lehigh in their conference tournament, so they've definitely got some steam. But however, Southern's a pretty strong team. First time back in the tournament since 2013. They actually took number 1 seed Gonzaga to a pretty tight game, and normally 1 against 16, you're just trying to keep your legs fresh for 2 days later. All right, let's move on to the Michigan against Tulsa game. 22-12, Michigan enters. Luke, I know you've got some Michigan in you. Your sister goes there. Give us a little bit of what are you thinking for this game?
Well, Max, Michigan's playing pretty good basketball right now. You saw them beat Indiana in the Big Ten tournament, so they're obviously playing well. Finished with a regular season record of 22-12, had some rough patches, but no bad losses for this team, and they shoot the ball very well, so I think they're going to continue that hot shooting streak and play well against Tulsa and get the win.
Nick, I know that Tulsa a lot of people disagree with them being in the field, but what do you expect to see from this game?
Well, they are 20-11, so I think that they could give Michigan a possible run for their money, but I think Michigan, like Luke said, they're coming off hot. They beat Indiana, who's the 5 seed, and I think that Michigan will take this one home.
Yeah, Tulsa does have James Woodard, Shaquille Harrison, and Frank Haith, and that's got one of the best backcourts in the country. I also am going to take Michigan. They're a little bit too hot right now. Donald's been playing great, along with, Cam Chapman has stepped up as of late, as we saw him hit that 3 against Indiana, which many would say that put Michigan in the tournament
No doubt.
because they didn't win the Big Ten tournament. Michigan State did. All right, we'll be right back for more on the West Regional. This next regional is definitely the wild, wild west. We've got the number 1 seed Oregon Ducks taking on the winner of the Holy Cross against Southern Game. Obviously, the 1 seed against the 16 seed. We've never seen a 16 come out of that game. Is it safe to say that Oregon's going to win this game, boys?
I think that they will. I mean, like you said earlier, a 1 seed has never fallen to a 16 seed, and I think that even though Oregon is the lowest seeded 1 seed, I think that they'll be able to take this one home.
Luke, Oregon coming off of winning their conference championship in heavy fashion by a 30-point win over Utah.
Yep.
They've got to have confidence through the roof, right?
Yeah, they're playing really well right now. They spread the floor, and they got a very high-paced offense, so I think they'll have no problems in the first round for sure.
Key player to watch is Chris Boucher. He was actually an NAIA player, and 6'10" forward, 7'4" wingspan, and he didn't start playing organized basketball until he was 19. So this is his senior year at Oregon, but he's one of the best players on Oregon, probably the best player. Shoots it at 66% inside the arc, and then he's hit more than 33 so far this year. All right, let's move on to a very intriguing matchup. This 8 seed St. Joe's against Cincinnati, the Bearcats. You know, these 8-9 teams are always pretty tough to predict. Luke, who do you have in this one?
I like St. Joseph winning this one, Max. Playing really good basketball right now, 27-7 on the regular season. I got them over Cincinnati in the first round.
Nick?
I think that St. Joe's will also win, Max. I mean, there hasn't really been a year where Cincinnati hasn't been ranked the 9 seed, and I don't think that they're going to be able to come out of this game with a victory.
Yeah, St. Joe's does have a very talented backcourt. A10 Player of the Year, DeAndre Bembry, along with Isaiah Miles, probably the most talented 1-2 in the conference. And they won their conference tourney, so they've got some momentum coming in to this the March Madness. All right, let's move on to the Baylor against Yale matchup. I know a lot of people love these 5-12 matchups for upsets. Do either of you guys see it?
Yeah, I actually do have Yale beating Baylor in one of my brackets, Max. Baylor, obviously a very good rebounding team. They got lots of size, and that's what they kind of are known for, crashing the offensive glass and stuff like that. But Yale's also a very big team, and I think they can match up well against Baylor. And if they shoot well, I think they can end up pulling off the upset.
Nick?
I do know that a lot of people pick the 12 seed over the 5 seed as their upset in their bracket, but in this one, I think that Baylor is going to come in and beat Yale. They lost first round in the tournament last year, and I think that they're going to come in with some fire against Yale and pull off the victory.
Yeah, we know Yale, they did not have to play in a conference tournament. The winner of the Ivy League gets the automatic bid, and the Ivy League Player of the Year, Justin Sears, who's averaging right around 16 points a game, he's got to be motivated. He has not gone to the tournament in years. And then Mike Mason scored 22 points in the title-clinching game. And, of course, for Baylor, they've got size down low, 6'8", Rico Gathers,
Yep.
NBA prospect. And not to mention, they've got 5 top 35 RPI wins and 0 losses outside the top 35 in terms of RPI. So a very intriguing matchup. And, of course, Terrian Price, legitimate NBA prospect, team high, 15.5 points per game. Let's move on to this Duke against UNC Wilmington. Obviously, they're coming from the same state. This game will be played in Providence, though. So you'd say the home court advantage would go to whoever's got the best traveling fans. You'd probably say Duke, larger fan base. Do any of you guys have the upset here?
I know Duke's been known for dropping some first-round games in the past, but I got Duke going through in this one against UNC Wilmington.
Nick?
I agree. Duke has had a little bit of a shaky season this year, but I see them winning this game.
Yeah, I just don't think that UNC Wilmington can keep up with Duke. Duke's averaging 81.5 points per game. The key for Duke, though, is not getting into foul trouble because they're low on their bigs. They need Chase Jeter to step up because, as we know, Emil Jefferson out for the season with a broken foot. And, of course, probably the number 2 prospect right now coming out of college, Brandon Ingram, he's going to have to carry Duke. He's only 18, so that's pretty tough. It's a young team. Keep that in mind. And, of course, Grayson Allen, the star player, all ACC. So he's obviously a little bit of controversy there, tripping a few guys. Did not get suspended, though. Let's move on to this very intriguing Texas against Northern Iowa matchup. 6-11 game. Luke, do you see anything playing out differently?
This was a tough one, Max. I know a lot of people have Northern Iowa that I've talked to, but I think Texas is going to advance in this one. They got Ridley, the big man, coming back, and I think he's going to fill in some gaps that they've had down low throughout the season, and I like them advancing for sure.
Nick?
I agree with Luke. I mean, Northern Iowa was a 5 seed last year. They made a little bit of a run, but I think that Texas is going to pull off this one with their size and, like Luke said, Ridley coming back down low.
So originally I looked at this game, and I really wanted the winner of this game would most likely play Texas A&M. I would like to see the Texas against Texas A&M matchup, but I just don't see it. UNI is coming in, winning their 12 of their last 13, and on a 6-game winning streak since they won their conference tournament. Wes Waspun has been great for him. Obviously, he hit that buzzer beater. It's gone viral after that over at Evansville. But I'm taking UNI in the upset there. Moving on to Texas A&M against the Green Bay Phoenix. You know, Green Bay last year had Kiefer Sykes, but they never made the tournament with them. Do you guys see an upset here, or do you see A&M rolling?
I do have A&M in this game, but I think Green Bay is going to give them a game for sure. But I think in the end, Texas A&M is going to be just a little bit too much for the Phoenix, and I have them advancing.
All right, Nick.
I think Texas A&M will advance as well. I mean, I would like to see the Texas A&M game, as you said, so I think that Texas A&M will advance in this one.
Yeah, so do I. They've got Tyler Davis down low, the freshman. Probably will be NBA ready when he's a junior. And, of course, Danwell House. Shot-happy kid, though, so if he starts missing, he's going to put up his shots. And Jalen Jones, probably the best player on the team. The key for them is foul discipline. They aren't very deep. And, of course, Green Bay Phoenix, they're getting their possessions done in about 13 seconds. And as we know, in getting more possessions in the postseason, that's going to be key for them. Let's see if they can maybe try to slow it down. But that just might be their game. All right, let's move on to the Oregon State against VCU. Very intriguing matchup. I've heard a lot of picks both ways. Oregon State, they've got Gary Payton Jr., of course, the son of the glove. And VCU, first year without Shaka Smart, though. Luke, what do you have for this one?
I like VCU in this one, the 10 seed over the 7 seed Oregon State. And although Shaka Smart is gone, like you said, they still play that same sort of defense. They wreak havoc. They press most of the game. So I like VCU's pressure to get to Oregon State and put them into the second round.
Nick?
Yeah, I love these 10-7 games, but I'm going to have to go with VCU in this one, the 10 seed, for reasons that Luke said. Shaka Smart gone, but they still play same type of ball that they did when he was there. So I see VCU, the 10 seed, advancing in this one.
I'm going to take VCU as well. They've got one of the best combos in terms of 1-2 combos in the conference, and not to mention Mo Alley Cox, a junior, going to probably play professionally as a football player, one of the most ferocious dunkers in the nation. And then obviously the first year of the Will Wade era. Let's see if he can get a postseason win underneath his belt. Let's move on to the Oklahoma-Cal State Bakersfield game, 2 against 15 matchup. What do you have in this one, Luke?
I think Oklahoma's going to take this one. We've seen some 2-15 upsets in the past year, but I just don't see Buddy Hield giving this one up for Oklahoma.
Nick?
I agree. Buddy Hield struggled in the last game, but I see him coming back hotter than ever in this March Madness tournament. He's going to want to make it big here. I see Oklahoma advancing.
Yeah, I would have to agree there. Oklahoma is a very strong team this year. And Buddy Hield, what can you not say about the kid? He was, 0.1 seconds away from winning the conference championship.
Crazy, yep.
Double
Or
clutch half-court
going
shot,
to
yeah.
there, but Obviously, unfortunately, they lost that game against West Virginia. Well, both sides, you could say. Well, good for West Virginia, but it's like the Jalen Adams there, but of obviously the Big 12. But I like Buddy Hield and the Sooners in this game. He's averaging 25 points per game, and he's shooting at 46% beyond the arc. All right, let's just take a quick glance at the second-round matchup. Oregon against St. Joe's. We both picked the same teams here. Who you got, Luke?
I think it's going to be a very tight one, but I do have Oregon advancing. St. Joe's is a very good team. I alluded to them earlier, 27-7 on the year, but I do think Oregon will advance.
Nick?
I think St. Joe's will give them a run for their money, but Oregon, the 1 seed, I don't see them falling in the second-round game. I see them advancing.
I would agree there. I just don't think that St. Joe's can match up down low as well as Oregon can. Oregon's very versatile. All right, so Luke, I know that you had Yale against Duke. Who do you have in that one? I know Nick and I have a different matchup. Who do you have, Luke?
I do like Duke in this one. I think Yale's run ends there. Too much offense from Duke, like you said, Brandon Ingram, Grayson Allen, and also Luke Kennard off the bench is going to be very key for Duke.
Nick?
You and I have the 4-5 game, Duke versus Baylor. Max, I see the higher seed, number 4 Duke, coming through in this one. I see Grayson Allen. As long as he stays disciplined, I think that they'll win this game.
Yeah, I would agree there. I've got Duke in this game as well. So my only concern, though, is Duke down low. Marshall Plumlee is just a body down there, but he doesn't really provide a whole lot of offense. And having to go up against Rico Gathers, that's my only cause for concern there. And I don't know, it's Duke. They won last year. They're going to have all this pressure on them to make. Most would say they could be one of the top 2 favorites out of this because no one's sure about Oregon. But I'm going to take Duke in this game as well. Okay, so this one, I believe Nick and I took UNI over Texas, or was it only?
I took Texas, yeah.
All right, you took Texas. Did you take?
I took Texas as well.
Okay. How about that Texas against A&M game? Obviously, the Battle of Texas there.
Well, I think that the 6 seed Texas, if it comes to that, I think that they'll win this game. Texas, they're always huge. They can dominate the boards, and I think that they'll overpower the number 3 Texas A&M.
Luke?
I actually like Texas A&M in this game. Playing really well right now. Had a good run in the SEC tournament. I think they're going to continue that good play and get a win in the second-round matchup.
I've got UNI against A&M. I'm going to take A&M in this game just because I don't feel like UNI can match up as well down low as Texas A&M, and I truly think that's where rings are won, or nets are going to be cut down. I was thinking pro for a second there. But you do get a ring for college basketball. But people don't value rebounds enough in shot blocking, and that's exactly what A&M has. All right, let's move on to the VCU-Oklahoma matchup. Very intriguing matchup, as we know. Oklahoma has great guard play, but VCU likes to come out in that press. What do you guys have? Luke, go ahead.
I like Oklahoma advancing, although I think VCU will play them tough. Look for VCU to try and shut down Buddy Hield. That's what we've seen teams in the Big 12 do recently, and it's worked. But I think guys like Woodard and Spangler for Oklahoma will lead Oklahoma into the Sweet 16.
Nick?
I wholeheartedly agree with that one. I think Oklahoma will advance in this one against the Rams. I think that their run's going to come to an end here. Buddy Hield, Spangler, all of Oklahoma's star players are just going to have to come up in this one, and I think that they'll have no problem winning.
Yeah, I would agree there. I like Oklahoma's guard play. I think that they get past VCU in this one just because they've got depth. That's a key thing in March. You can't just, you could play 7 guys, but you won't win the championship that way, unfortunately. Duke did last year, but we've got to keep in mind that they had multiple first-round picks on this team, and OU does not have that. So same with VCU. All right, that's all for the West Regional. We'll be right back after the break with the Midwest Region. Welcome back here. We've got Bracket Breakdown. I'm your host, Max Abrahamson. Alongside me is Luke Lusson and Nick Jacobs. Now we're going to go over the Midwest region. Very intriguing region. We've got multiple teams that we think can emerge here. Let's start off with the 116 matchup. Virginia, guys.
Yep, I'm going Virginia for sure.
Yeah, I would have to tend to agree there. All right, Texas Tech against Butler. Good matchup there. Texas Tech has turned it around with Tubby Smith, but Butler boasts Roosevelt Jones, who's pretty good for them. They're coming out of the Big East. Luke, what do you have in this game?
I like Butler, just like you said. Not only Roosevelt Jones, but Kellen Dunham can put the ball in the net as well. I think just because of their tournament experience, and Butler obviously done so well in the past, I think they're gonna beat a young team like Texas Tech.
All right, Nick.
8-9 games are always tight, but in this one I see Texas Tech coming out. They've given a lot of top 25 teams some pretty good games and even beaten some of them, so I see them advancing here.
Yeah, you're right. They beat Oklahoma, Iowa State, Baylor, and Texas. They've only lost 3 times to teams with sub-30 RPIs. But however, I do have Butler in this game. Going back, I probably would look at Texas Tech just because of their quality wins. But I do like Butler. They've got some experience to their team. And Texas Tech is a very young team. All right, Purdue against Arkansas Little Rock. I know Purdue has caused all this commotion around school because, listen, they've got great bigs down low, but they don't have the best guard play. They're more of a defensive team. Luke, can you give us some insight on this matchup?
Well, like you said, with a little bit of a weak guard play for Purdue, they're inconsistent in that position, and Arkansas Little Rock actually will throw the press at them, a team like West Virginia does. So I think Purdue will struggle with this press at first, but just too much big people down low, Isaac Haas, A.J. Hammonds, of course, and Caleb Swanigan. I think those 3 will be a pivotal role in this win for Purdue.
All right, Nick.
I agree with this one. I think even though 5-12 is a big upset matchup, I think that Purdue's going to come out of this one.
So funny story about Arkansas Little Rock. Their coach, Chris Beard, had to sign 10 players for his program as they lost so many players last year. And it's mostly transfers on this team, but they won their conference title by 20 points over UM Monroe. So scary team. They're 29-4. No joke for this team. Why lose now if that's probably their mentality. But I'm going to take Purdue. They're just a little bit too strong to not pick. I mean, these 5-12, it's not as apparent as in past years, I would say. But I like Purdue in this one. All right, let's move on to Iowa State against Iona. I know Iona has caused a little bit of an uproar in years past, and obviously Iowa State lost last year to UAB. Luke, what do you have in this one?
I think Iowa State will end that streak of losing in the first round. I think they'll take this one over Iona. I think a guy like George Niang is just a very good player, and I think he's going to lead Iowa State to a victory.
Nick?
I agree with Luca on this one. Iowa State, they're going to want some revenge from the tournament this year. I see them winning this game.
The key about Iowa State, though, obviously George Niang, but they've lost 5 of their last 7 to teams, but 5 of those last 6 were on the road to NCAA tournament teams. They've got 8 top 50 RPI wins and only 1 sub 50 loss. So, and Georges Niang averaging right around 20 points. I really like this team. I'm going to take Iowa State as well. Seton Hall against Gonzaga. I think this is by far the best 6-11 matchup out of all of them because Gonzaga, they were, I believe, what were they? 2 seed last year.
Yeah.
And they had Kyle Wiltshire. They still do. And Domantas Sabonis, probably going top 15 in the NBA draft this next year. Upset or no there?
I really don't think so, Max. Although Seton Hall probably wasn't the strongest team you'd think of earlier in the year, but boy, they got hot as the season went on and they won their conference tournament. Gonzaga's a really good team as well. As you said, 2 top picks in the NBA. I see the higher seed Seton Hall continuing their hot streak here.
Luke?
Yeah, completely agree with Nick. Seton Hall, like you said, very hot team. They're playing great right now. Obviously upset Villanova in their conference championship. Watch out for Gonzaga. I think it'll be a really good game, and I definitely agree with you that it will be the best 6-11 matchup, but I think in the end, Seton Hall is going to win this one.
I know that's a late game, but folks, you need to make sure you record that one. It's just way too high caliber of a first-round game to miss. Isaiah Whitehead is a first-round talent in the NBA draft, I'd say. He really carries this team. And obviously, they just won their conference tournament in the Big East, so I see them really being a dangerous team in this one. And of course, Gonzaga, as we mentioned earlier, one of the best coaches in the country, and then just that team has experience above all. Let's move on to the Utah against Fresno State game. Luke, I know you got a little bit of something here for us.
Yeah, I'm going to go with 14 seed, Fresno State. And when you're looking for an upset team, I like to look for star players because we've seen in the past guys like R.J. Hunter. Star players are what lead Stephen Curry. Players like that are what lead upsets for their Cinderella story teams. And Fresno State has that guy in Marvell Harris. He scores 20.6 points per game. And I think they can knock off Utah in the first round.
Nick?
Well, in the past few years, Max, we have seen a lot of 14 seeds upset the 3 seed. A lot of good teams go out early, but even though Utah may be a little overrated, I think that they'll be able to pull off this one against Fresno State.
I too like Utah. Jakob Poeltl is one of the best big men down low. He's going to go top 10 in the NBA draft. And, you know, they beat Duke earlier this year, so they've obviously got some experience there to be able to upset a team. They had most of the team from last year from the NCAA tournament. They were 5 seed last year without Delon Wright, the point guard for them last year. But I like Utah just because they're the 3 seed, but they've been slumping. They just got blown out by 34. We saw them on Selection Sunday. They flickered to their team party. Mm-hmm. They were laying back, and that's still 12 hours. You got to get over your loss and get ready for the NCAA tournament. You know you're going. All right, let's move on to this Dayton against Syracuse game. Many are surprised that Syracuse are in the bracket because they've got 13 losses, and one of those losses is to St. John's. Luke, what do you think in this one?
I like Dayton. Like you said, Syracuse, I'm a little questionable on why they are in the tournament. And I think Dayton, a team who's had success in past years in the tournament, I think they'll win the 7-10 matchup in advance.
Nick?
Well, Max, I'm a fan of Syracuse myself, but I just, like Luke said, I don't know why they're really in the tournament in the first place, and I see Dayton, who's had success in the tournament, pulling this one off.
I've got Dayton as well. The key factor for them, though, is Kendall Pollard, and he's got a bone bruise underneath his left knee, so just keep an eye out on that. If he goes down, Dayton's done. So got to be cautious there, but he's going to play that first-round game, and that he should easily carry them through that matchup. All right, Michigan State against Middle Tennessee. Nick, what do you have for us here?
Michigan State is a powerhouse team, Max. I see Denzel Valentine leading this team to victory here.
Luke?
Completely agree. Michigan State's not going to go down, not with the way they're playing right now. We've talked a lot about teams that are playing great basketball, and Michigan State might be at the top of that list, so I got Michigan State for sure.
So the key to the upset, I would say, you have to have great guard play. I'm still going to pick Michigan State, don't get me wrong. They're probably one of the top teams in the country, one of the favorites, obviously. But Middle Tennessee does have some pretty intriguing guards to look at. Giddy Potts Jr. is a guard that you got to keep an eye out for, and he shoots 50% from beyond the arc. So if he catches fire, that could put him a little bit of a hole in Michigan State's sock. But I'm going to take Michigan State as well. All right, we're going to move on. We've got UVA against Butler. Luke, who do you have in this one?
I think Butler can definitely give UVA a game, but in the end, UVA obviously a defensive-oriented team. I think their defense will be too much for Kellen Dunham and Roosevelt Jones. They got the 1 seed advancing for sure.
Nick?
I actually had Texas Tech beating Butler in the first round game, but like Luke said, defensive-minded UVA, I think that they'll pull this one off with ease.
I'm going to take UVA as well. Malcolm Brogdon is one of the top guards in the country, and they've got multiple players that can really carry this team. All right, Purdue against Iowa State, a 4-5 matchup here. Great matchup, I would say. Both teams have great forwards and centers. Luke, who do you have in this one?
Yeah, this is one of the toughest games, second-round games at least, for me to pick, no doubt. But I'm going to take Iowa State. Although they play 6-7 guys, I think their guards, Monty Morris, and then George Niang, not a very big guy. Good player, though, and I think those guys will give Purdue problems on the defensive end. I got Iowa State.
Nick?
Iowa State's got a short bench, as Luke said, and I think Purdue's size is going to help them win this game. I have 5 seed Purdue going through.
I'm going to take Iowa State. I do like Purdue's team, though. Caleb Swanigan Obviously, he was the 9th overall recruit this past year. He's only a freshman. Diaper dandy, as Dick Vitale likes to call it. But a little bit too much inexperience from this Purdue team. And then A.J. Hammonds, he's good down low, but he does not like to run the court. We saw that in their game against Michigan State, where he didn't touch the ball really in the last minute. I've got Iowa State in this one. Seton Hall against Utah or Fresno State, as Luke picked.
I got Seton Hall beating Fresno State. I think the Bulldogs of Fresno State, their run ends there. Seton Hall just playing too good of basketball right now. I think they'll continue that play and move on.
Nick, how about you for the Seton Hall against Utah matchup?
Like I said before, I think the 3 seed for Utah is a little too high. I think Seton Hall is going to continue their streak of good wins and knock off Utah.
I'm going to take Seton Hall as well. I just don't think that Utah is a very good team, but I do think that they'll get past their first game. But as of now, they got to prove something to me, because obviously they had that great win against Duke. Everyone thought that they'd be really good. They had a great Pac-12 season, but then you get blown out by 34. I mean, show up, please. You had a day to prepare, and it's not like you haven't played Oregon. You knew what they were going to come out with.
Yep.
So I've got Seton Hall in that game. Dayton against MSU, pretty good matchup. Luke, who do you have in this one?
I got Michigan State rolling. Dayton could cause some problems against Michigan State, but Nick talked about it earlier. Denzel Valentine and also Bryn Forbes can shoot the ball very well for Michigan State, so I got them.
That's for sure. Nick?
Dayton has had some tournament success in the past few years, but I really don't think anybody's going to stop Michigan State from winning in the second round.
Yeah, I would agree. I've got Michigan State as well. One of the best defensive teams in the country. All right, that's all for the Midwest Regional. We'll be back for more with the East, the Beast of the East Regional, I like to call it. It's a great regional. We'll be back right after the break. Welcome back, folks. You're watching Bracket Breakdown. I'm your host, Max Abrahamson. Alongside me, Luke Lusson and Nick Jacobs. Beast of the East Regional, I'd like to call it. Their regional final will be played in Philadelphia. That first game, we've got UNC against the winner of the FGCU or Fairleigh Dickinson game. North Carolina, guys?
I think so, yeah,
Carolina.
no doubt.
Too big and too strong, I'd say. All right, this is a very good matchup. We've got Providence, who boasts a top 10 pick, probably, Chris Dunn, great guard. And USC, Andy Enfield, used to coach FGCU, brings out a very fast-paced tempo offense for USC. Luke, who do you have in this one?
Max, although Providence has had a little bit of a slip up at the end and towards the middle of this year, I think you talked about it earlier, Chris Dunn and Ben Bentel, I think, for Providence will lead the way, and I think they'll win this 8-9 matchup.
All right, Nick.
I agree with Luke here. I think Providence will win under the leadership of Chris Dunn.
That's for sure. I've got Providence as well. All right, moving on to the Indiana against Chattanooga game. Who do you have, Luke? I know you're an Indiana fan, but I would tend to agree with you here. Indiana?
I do have Indiana. I just think they have too much offensive firepower. Chattanooga is a team, though, that turns teams over a lot, and Indiana is a turnover-prone team, but I think the hot shooting of Indiana will just be too much for Chattanooga.
Nick?
I think Indiana will win as well. Like Luke said, Chattanooga possibly could upset them, but I think under the leadership of Yogi Ferrell and the shooting guards of Indiana, I think they'll move on.
Yeah, I would agree. I've got Indiana as well. Of course, Indiana has two former LT players, Nick Zeisloft and Harrison Nego. No one thought that Harrison would play this year. However, he's gotten pretty sizable minutes. I mean, obviously not starter minutes, but coming off the bench and providing a key role off the bench. And Nick Zeisloft can step in, hit a few threes, do what Coach Tom Crean asks. All right, let's move on. We've got Kentucky against Stony Brook. I love this matchup for Kentucky. I've got Kentucky in this one. Luke, who do you have?
I think Stony Brook is a very good team. Jameel Warney scored 43 points, 10 rebounds in that conference championship for Stony Brook, but like you said, Kentucky, I just think they're too big, too strong. I got Kentucky moving on.
Nick?
Kentucky's a great team every year. They made a run last year. I'm actually very surprised they didn't win it all last year, but I think that Kentucky's a very strong team this year as well, and I think that they'll move on past Stony Brook.
I've got Kentucky as well. I love Jameel Warney, though. I had a chance to watch their game against Vermont, and he was a force to be reckoned with down low. And I feel like if Stony Brook had better guards and had other players that can score a little bit, maybe get 15 points, that could be an upset potentially, but they'll need Warney to have a huge day, and I don't see it against Kentucky or UK in that one. All right, so we've got this next one. A very intriguing game if Michigan wins, obviously the rivalry between Michigan against Notre Dame. So the winner of Michigan against Tulsa against Notre Dame, who do you guys have in this one?
Well, I got Michigan winning that first 4 game, and I think they're going to upset Notre Dame as well. Great shooting team in Michigan. Derek Walton running the point for that team, and Mark Donald down low. And also a guy like Muhammad Ali Abdul-Rahman. I think Michigan can shoot the ball very well and knock off Notre Dame in the first round.
Nick?
I just don't see it happening. I see Notre Dame coming out this one with a W. I think that they can shoot the ball a little bit better than Michigan can, and I think that they won't really have too much trouble beating Michigan.
All right, I've got Michigan winning that first round matchup. I've got Michigan. I like that team. I'm not big on Notre Dame, but they do have a few good forwards. Obviously, Zach August, and they've got a few good guards. But I do like Michigan. They're a hot team right now. They've got a chip on their shoulder, and they got to be playing motivated. But this is not a prototypical John Beilein team, obviously. All right, let's move on. We've got the West Virginia against Stephen F. Austin. Stephen F. Austin's entering at 27-5. Luke, who do you have?
I got the Mountaineers from West Virginia beating the Lumberjacks from Stephen F. Austin in this one. I just think the pressure that West Virginia puts on teams is going to be too much for the small Stephen F. Austin.
Nick?
SF Austin is a team that people pick to upset like almost every year, but I think that, like Luke said, the whole game press of the Mountaineers is going to overwhelm SF Austin in this one.
West Virginia or Press Virginia? They'll get at it right off the gate. However, I do like the Stephen F. Austin team. They're on a 20-game winning streak under Brad Underwood, their coach. And Thomas Walkup had a career-high 37 points at Sam Houston State earlier this month. However, I do have West Virginia in this game. They're just too strong down low, and obviously they get out and run in transition, force turnovers. I really like that team, West Virginia in that one. Wisconsin against Pittsburgh. Luke, who do you have in that one?
I think that Wisconsin's got a lot of heart this year. I mean, if you would have told me that they were going to make the tournament 2 weeks into the season after that terrible start they had, I would have called you crazy. But Greg Gard has done a great job filling in for Bo Ryan's head coaching job, and I think that Wisconsin's going to have a lot of pride, and I think they're going to take this one home.
Nick?
Max, I actually like Pitt in this. I like Pitt in this matchup. They gave UNC a very good run for their money. They were winning for almost the whole game in the tournament, and they've given the top 25 teams very good games this year. I just see Wisconsin as a little bit of a weaker team than Pitt is, and I see Pitt moving on.
Yeah, I've got Wisconsin in this game. They've gone 11-2 down the stretch. Obviously, they started off at 9-9 and 1-4 in the Big Ten. They really turned it around. I love Nigel Hayes for the Badgers. He's been mentored a little bit by Sam Decker and Frank Kaminsky, so he knows from the great college basketball players. Let's see if he can finally emerge, and this would be his march to do it. Not having huge expectations coming in, just come in, win the game, and maybe cause some havoc down the road. I've got Wisconsin in that one. Xavier against Weber State. I know that Damian Lillard went to Weber State, but let's be honest, they're not rolling him out. Who do you have in this one, Luke?
I got the Musketeers of Xavier going through, no problem. I know you said Damian Lillard went to Weber State, but he's obviously not there anymore. I don't see Weber State making any type of run in this tournament.
Nick?
I agree with Luke. I got Xavier in this one.
Yeah, I've got Xavier in this one also. They've got Chris Mack, their head coach, won the National Coach of the Year by the United States Basketball Writers Association. They've also got a beast of a big man in the middle, Jalen Reynolds. So be on the lookout for them. pretty good on the glass as a team, I would say. All right, let's move on to the round of 32. We've got UNC again, correct. Round of 32, UNC against Providence. Luke, who do you have here?
I know I've heard some stuff about Providence winning this game and upsetting UNC, but I just think Marcus Page and Bryce Johnson are going to be too much for Providence. I see them moving on.
Nick?
I see the 1 seed moving on as well. Tar Heels have Marcus Page, like Luke said. Although he has struggled a little bit this year, I think that he's going to be able to use his leadership and move on.
I would agree there. UNC is a very strong team. However, Providence does have the components that they would need for an upset, but I just don't see it happening because Marshall Page has really turned it around, and obviously down low, Bryce Johnson and Kennedy Meeks, he's been emerging. We've got UNC in that one. How about this one? Indiana against Kentucky. Obviously, Dick Vitale with probably the greatest call of all time.
No doubt.
It's unbelievable when Christian Watford hit that 3 against Kentucky when Kentucky was number 1. Luke, who do you have in this game?
Got to go with my Hoosiers, Max. Last time these two teams played was in the tournament that year after Indiana did beat them in the regular season. Kentucky beat them. I think Indiana's coming out for revenge. I think they're going to knock off the 4 seed.
Nick?
Although Indiana is a very strong shooting team, I just think the size of Kentucky and John Calipari's coaching is going to lead them on here in this one.
I've got Kentucky in this one also. I just feel like they're a little bit too much for Indiana down low, as well as I feel like their guards are a little bit better. Ulis, people need to throw his name into National Player of the Year. He's only and Coach Calipari said this, people are afraid to crown him as that because he's only 5'9". And that's scary that he's doing what he does in the SEC. Obviously not as strong as the conference as it normally is, but they do have A&M this year. And he single-handedly basically won that conference championship for them. He was the key player for them all year. I've got Kentucky in that one. All right, moving on. Luke and I have Michigan against West Virginia. And then, Nick, you've got Notre Dame, West Virginia. We'll start off with you. What do you have in that one?
I saw Notre Dame winning the first round game, but I think, once again, the press of West Virginia is going to overwhelm Notre Dame here in this one. I think West Virginia's going to move on to the Sweet 16.
Luke, Michigan against West Virginia. Who do you have here?
I think Michigan, we've talked a little bit about their injuries. No Karis LeVert or Spike Albrecht this year. I think that West Virginia is going to be a little bit too much for them. If Michigan did have their guards, I think they could handle this press from West Virginia, but I think in the end they're just going to be too much for Michigan.
I would agree there, and obviously that would be the third game that Michigan would have to play.
Yep.
Their legs might be a little bit tired, as they would have to play Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. That's just a little bit too tough for me to choose a team like that they're coming off a Big Ten tournament. They've got some injuries, Karis LeVert and Spike Albrecht. I just don't see it. I like West Virginia there. All right, let's move on. Wisconsin against Xavier. Great matchup here. Who do you guys have? Luke?
I'm riding the Badger train, Max. I think they just got a lot of heart, this team. There's something about this team that I like, and I think that they're going to play lots of passion in this game. I think they're going to knock off the 2 seed ultimately and move on.
Nick, I know you have Pittsburgh against Xavier. Who do you have here?
Like I said, I think Pitt's a stronger team than people think they are, but I don't think they're going to be able to upset number 2 Xavier.
I've got Wisconsin in this one. Just because, as Luke said, they're heart of this team. To be honest, I don't think that the Big East is all that good other than Seton Hall. They don't really play a tough out-of-conference schedule. And I'm just not sold on Xavier. I've seen some of their games, but in those games that I've watched, I'm not sold on them. I'm going to take Wisconsin in that one. That's all for the East Regional. We'll be right back after the break with the South, which boasts the number 1 overall seed, Kansas. Hello and welcome back to Bracket Breakdown. You're watching LTTV. I'm your host, Max Abrahamson. Alongside me, Luke Lusson and Nick Jacobs. Let's move on to the South region here. We've got Kansas, the number 1 overall seed, as we mentioned earlier. Their first round game is against Austin Peay, Luke, who do you have in this one?
Kansas, no doubt, number one overall seed. I don't see them losing.
Nick, Kansas?
Kansas as well, Max.
Yeah, Austin Peay, their nickname is the Governors. It's going to be one term for them. One and done. We've got Colorado in the 8-9 matchup. Colorado against UConn. Who do you guys have in this one?
Max, there's something about UConn in March. They just come to play no matter how bad of a season they have before that. Obviously not too bad of a season, 24-10 overall, but they just play great in March, and I think they're going to knock off Colorado in this 8-9 matchup and play Kansas in the second round.
Nick?
I agree with Luke here. UConn is a tournament team. We saw them win as a 7-8 seed, I think, a few years ago, and I think that they're going to be able to pull off this one against number 8 Colorado.
Yeah, as you mentioned, they were the 7 seed that year. They had Shabazz Napier on that team, and obviously they were a pretty strong team, head coached by Kevin Ollie. They still have him there. I like UConn in that game also. But the funny thing is, right before the tournament, had Jalen Adams not hit that 60-foot shot to send that game into quadruple overtime, we would not be talking about him right now. But they played their way into this bracket. Obviously, they won their conference tournament, but they're 9 seed, so they're definitely up there. All right, Maryland against South Dakota State, another 5-12 matchup. Luke?
I know it's the dreaded 5-12 matchup. You want to always pick the upset in that one, but I think Maryland, Melo Trimble is just going to be too much in this game. I see him leading the Terrapins to a second-round game.
Nick?
I like Maryland in this one too, Max. I just don't think South Dakota State has got what it takes to knock off Melo Trimble and the Terrapins.
Yeah, Melo Trimble, Rashid Suleiman, used to play for Duke, Jake Lehman, Diamond Stone, Robert Carter. Too much for South Dakota State to handle. I've got Maryland in that game as well. All right, now this is a game that has been talked around school quite a bit. Cal against Hawaii. Hawaii is 27-5 coming in. Cal is 23-10. However, they do have 2 players that will more than likely be top 10 picks, Ivan Rabb and Jalen Brown. Brown projected to go 3rd overall. Luke, who do you have in this one?
I like Cal because of those 2 players you just stated, Rabb and Brown. I think they'll lead the Golden Bears to a victory.
Nick?
Hawaii has given some people some close games earlier in the season, but I go with the 4 seed Cal right here.
Yeah, as you mentioned, they do have a few quality wins. They beat UNI, Northern Iowa, but I just think that Cal's a little bit too much for them. They're coming in, only giving up 67 points per game. They're getting 40 rebounds per game. That's towards the top in the nation. I've got Cal in that one. All right, so Arizona against the winner of Wichita State and Vanderbilt. I know we each picked Wichita State. So Arizona, Wichita State, who do you guys got?
I'm going to take the upset. I think Wichita State, assuming they do beat Vanderbilt tonight, but I think when they do that, they're going to knock off the 6 seed Arizona, Fred VanVleet, Ron Baker. Very talented team that hasn't been talked about much this year. I think they can knock off Arizona.
Nick?
I think Arizona is a lot weaker than they have been in past years, and I also think that the Shockers can take this one home if Baker and VanVleet step up to the plate.
You know, I'm scared to pick this game in my overall bracket until this matchup finally unwinds. I need to see Wichita State in there for me to pick them. But I am going to take Wichita State as of now. But if Vanderbilt wins that game, I'm taking Arizona. So Wichita State wins, picking them over Arizona, I would say that's what I would go with. Fred VanVleet, they've got some experience. Arizona, they do have Gabe York, who's been pretty solid for them all year, and Alonzo Trier, but I'm just not big on them this year. Miami, the U, or Buffalo? Who do you have here?
I'm going to go with Miami. One of the best teams out of the ACC. I don't see them having any trouble against Buffalo.
Nick?
They come out as a 3 seed in the tournament, Max. I see Miami winning this one too.
I've got the U in this one as well. They've got quite a few athletic players that can get out and run in transition. As we're going to mention later in the show, some of the top coaches in March, you got to throw Jim Larinaga in there. He's been great for Miami all these years. They've produced NBA talent, Shane Larkin. Obviously, he's on the Nets now, hasn't gotten a whole lot of minutes, but he's getting players to the pro stage, and that's why I like the U in this one. All right, so obviously I'm wearing my Iowa shirt here, and I'll be honest with you. I like this team. They're probably the streakiest team in college basketball, but they're going to take on Temple this first round game. I'd say that Iowa is probably the best double-digit loss team in the country, just because of who they've beaten. Home and home sweeps of both Purdue and Michigan State. They've got some experience playing good teams. Luke, who do you have in this one?
I think it is a scary game for Iowa. Obviously not playing their best right now. Dropped a lot of their recent games, but I think they will handle Temple, and I think they'll advance.
Nick?
I'm with both of you on this one. I think even though Iowa has struggled as late, they did very well at the beginning of their season, and I think that they can knock off Temple in this matchup.
I'm going to take Iowa as well. People always talk about Jared Utoff, and obviously he's been great for us all year, playing the small forward, a power forward, can stretch into a two-guard. But Peter Jock, he's been huge for the Hawkeyes, and his name does not get thrown around at all. So he's been really good, and people don't realize he's their second scorer there for Iowa. I've got Iowa in that one. All right, Villanova against UNC Asheville. Luke, who do you have here?
I like Villanova in this one against the 15th seed UNC Asheville. I just think guys like Daniel Chefu down low for Villanova are going to lead them to a win.
Nick?
I have Villanova in this one too, Max. I was actually kind of surprised that they didn't pull off the 1 seed, but it doesn't really matter. I think that they'll come off with a victory in this one.
Yeah, I like Villanova in this one as well. They play great defense. They only give up around 64 points per game. Villanova in that one. All right, KU against UConn. Great matchup, Kansas, UConn. Both very storied in March, as we can say. Obviously, Mario Chalmers with that huge three-pointer over Memphis years back when Memphis had Derrick Rose. And Kansas, Paul Pierce, all those greats that have walked into Allen Fieldhouse. Who do you guys have in this one? Luke, we'll start off with you.
I think it definitely is a scary matchup for Kansas in the second round, playing such a big program like UConn that plays so well in March. But I think the number 1 overall seed, Perry Ellis, will lead Kansas to a victory in this one.
Nick?
I agree with Luke here. Although UConn is a team that performs in March, I think Kansas will take the victory here. Like he said here, they have Perry Ellis, star player, and they have Devontae Graham, who's been stepping up as late as well. So I think that they'll be able to move on here.
I like Kansas as well. However, UConn does have a great shot blocker in Brima. He could contest Landon Lucas. Obviously, Lucas doesn't score a whole lot, but he's got that presence down low, and Brima carries that to him as well. If the guard play matches up, favors Kansas, and then what puts it over the top has to be the forwards there. I've got Kansas in that one. All right, Maryland against Cal. Who do you guys have here? Luke, we'll start off with you.
I think the 5 seed Maryland's going to take this one. You listed their starting 5, probably one of the best starting 5s in the country. Haven't really put it all together yet, but I think they will in this March Madness. Guys like Melo Trimble, Robert Carter, Jake Layman, I think they're just going to be too much for the young California team.
Nick?
Although Cal is the higher seed here and they are a pretty powerhouse team, I think that Maryland's going to be able to pull off the victory here with the amazing starting 5 that you said.
I'm going to take Cal in this one just because Melo Trimble's a little bit shot happy, and he's been putting up shots way too often as of now. And he's only shooting around 20%. So I'm going to take Cal. People would, technically this isn't an upset, but I'm going to call it an upset. I feel like Maryland has been a powerhouse all year, and then obviously they've dropped a little bit. Surprised they only got a 5 seed here, but I like Cal in that one. Okay, so most of us have Wichita State against the U. Who do you guys have there?
I'm going to keep going with Wichita State, obviously playing in a play-in game. They're going to be a little bit tired, but I think Fred VanVleet and Ron Baker have the capability to lead this team to a deep run, and I think they're going to make it to the Sweet 16.
Nick?
Like Luke said, I think that Wichita State has it in them to knock off the U here, as you said. Fred VanVleet, Ron Baker, 2 high-caliber players that can lead them to victory, and I think that they will.
So what I'm thinking it's going to be Wichita State against the U. However, Zona would beat Vanderbilt. I like the U regardless. I just think that they're a little bit too strong. They play in the ACC, so they've definitely played good competition. They beat Duke a few times this year, and they have experience playing good teams. I'm going to take the U in this one. All right, now this is a really great matchup, I would say. Jay Wright's Villanova Wildcats haven't made it out of the first weekend in 4 or 5 years, which that's remarkable considering the seats that they have received. They've gotten the 1s, they've gotten the 2s. They just can't click it together. Iowa against Villanova. Luke, who do you have?
Even though you said they haven't advanced past this first weekend in a good amount of time, I like Villanova, the 2 seed, to beat Iowa in this matchup.
Nick?
I was back and forth between this one for a while, Max. I know you're an Iowa fan, but for me, I think that I have to say that Villanova's going to break that barrier and move on.
You know, I would tend to agree that this is a very good Villanova team, but so have all of them have been. And I would say that out of the past few years, this is probably one of the weaker Villanova teams. And obviously, the Big East is not the same Big East. They used to have to play Louisville, Syracuse, among others. And now they're playing Xavier and then some bottom feeders. I just don't see it. I see the upset here, Iowa over Villanova, just because Iowa's playing in the Big Ten. They've got some quality wins, and they're one of the streakiest teams. And I feel like, you know, if they get a solid win under their belt, obviously they won last year as a 7 seed, lost to Gonzaga in the second round. I like Iowa. I think that they redeemed themselves. Now they know what they have to do for their second game during the weekend. They had that experience last year. Obviously didn't work out because Gonzaga advanced to the Elite Eight. I'm going to take Iowa. All right, well, that's all for the South region. You're watching Bracket Breakdown. We'll be right back after the break. Hello and welcome back to Bracket Breakdown. I'm your host, Max Abrahamson. Alongside me, Luke Lusson and Nick Jacobs. Now we're going to see if the shoe fits. Potential Cinderella story teams. Luke, who's your Cinderella story team?
I'm going to go with the 14 seed in the Midwest region, the Fresno State Bulldogs, coming off their win in the Mountain West Conference Championship. I know I've talked about it already, but Marvell Harris, the star player on this team, averages 20.6 points per game. I think he has the capability to lead this team on a deep tournament run.
Nick?
For me, I think that even though they have to beat Vandy in a playing game, I think that Wichita State, coming in as an 11 seed, if they win, will make a very deep run because great coaching. Greg Marshall, he's led them to past Cinderella story runs, made to the Final Four that one year. They got Fred Van Vliet and Ron Baker, as we mentioned before, 2 very high-caliber players, and I think that with the help of them and great coaching, I think that they could go far.
All right, I'm going to take 2 teams here. I really like VCU. Obviously, they would have to win their first game against Oregon State, which I think that's extremely reasonable to do, is I think that they're actually the better team. They should probably receive the 7 over Oregon State. And then they would have to play Oklahoma. Oklahoma, we know they have struggled historically in the first weekend. And then this press could really cause havoc on Oklahoma. And then I do like Iowa. As I mentioned, I've got them going to the Sweet 16. And I think they match up pretty well against Villanova. You don't need Adam Woodbury to score points. You just need to get rebounds against Ochefu. So I do like Iowa in that one. All right, let's move on to some star players to look out for. Nick, tell me a little bit about Buddy Hield.
Buddy Hield, that's all I really have to say. I mean, he's had multiple 30-point games. He did struggle in the tournament game. He only scored 6 points, and that was really not expected from him. But beginning of the year up until then, he's been probably the best player in all of college basketball. He's up there for Player of the Year, and I think that if he shows up in the tournament, Oklahoma will have a really good shot at making a deep run.
All right, you mentioned Player of the Year. The other Player of the Year candidate, Denzel Valentine. Luke, I know you're a Michigan fan, but Michigan State, you got to have some respect for that kid.
No doubt. He's the size of a small forward, but he plays like a point guard. This whole offense runs through him. I mean, every possession you're going to see a ball screen for Denzel Valentine. Great passer of the ball. I mean, his stat line is insane for a college basketball player. I don't know how he does it. He's definitely one of the Player of the Year candidates, and I wouldn't be surprised if he took it home.
All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about the ACC star players. Malcolm Brogdon, obviously he had his worst game of the year this past weekend against UNC in the conference championship game. He couldn't get anything to fall for him, but you got to look out for him. He's on Virginia, probably the best player on the team, and definitely a Player of the Year candidate out of the ACC. Bryce Johnson for UNC, walking double-double, averages a double-double, and he's had a few huge games so far, and he's going to be the force down low for UNC in this tournament. And of course, the hated Duke Blue Devils boast Grayson Allen, the guard. He's really merged. He had a great Final Four last year, as I'm sure people might remember. The kids were like, who is this kid? I mean, because they had Jahlil Okafor, Justice Winslow, Tyus Jones, and obviously they had a few seniors. Matt Jones, he was a sophomore or a junior there. But this is his time to shine. If he wants to go pro after this year, you better prove it to those scouts, because you got to not have him think about his attitude.
Yeah, I remember he threw down that dunk at the Final Four, I think, and then he's just known ever since then. He stepped up this year, and I see him doing very well in the tournament.
All right, let's go to our sleeper players to look out for. Luke, I know you mentioned for Stony Brook earlier, Jameel Warney. Tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, Jameel Warney from Stony Brook, obviously a team to look out for. They do play Kentucky in the first round, kind of a bad draw for him, but Jameel Warney, 43 points and 10 rebounds in the conference championship. Not much else to say about that guy. He's a beast down low. Could have some trouble against Kentucky, but sure is one of the star players to look out for.
Yeah, he's the only mid-major player to be nominated for the Power Forward of the Year. Obviously, he's put up against some high Division I players, but you know what? It's got to be good to get your name on that list. All right, Nick, who's your sleeper player to look out for?
For me, I think it is Isaiah Whitehead of Seton Hall. Seton Hall, very good team. They've been very streaky as of late. They're really hot coming into the tournament. He scored actually 26 points against Villanova in the conference championship, and I see him doing very well in the tournament.
I'm going to take Thomas Walkup from SF Austin. Obviously, I do have them losing that first round, but he could cause havoc on West Virginia. Can shoot the three pretty well, averages 18, 7, and 5. And you know what? Why not? Why not that kid? He's a winner. He's led his team to 27 and 5. He's definitely 20 wins over the 20 for 20. That's what they've been the past 20 games. They're on a great stretch as of now. He could be one. All right, let's move on to our most overrated team. Luke, tell me one.
I'm going to take Virginia. I know they're a great defensive team, but I just don't think that they have the offensive firepower. Obviously, a guy like Malcolm Brogdon, but he doesn't always bring it offensively for this team. Always great on defense, but Virginia, they lack offensive firepower, and I think that's a thing you need to have in this tournament to go to a Final Four, and I just think Virginia doesn't have that.
Nick?
I'm going to go with a 2-seed Villanova. As you mentioned before, early exits for a while for them. And even though that I have them winning the first 3 games, I think that they shouldn't really be a 2-seed. I'm just really confused at why they've been so shaky in the past couple of years. So I'm going to put them as one of my overrated teams.
I'm going to take Xavier for this one. I'm just not big on that team. I watched him play, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm just not sold. I'm not sold on the Big East, to be quite frank with you. And I'm not even sold with Seton Hall. I've only seen them play once, and that was their conference championship game, which they did play great. But back to Xavier, just not sold, because they held that #1 spot in the nation for a while, but they haven't. It's not like they played top competition throughout the regular season. They didn't schedule a tough non-conference schedule. And they've got a pretty easy conference. And this is probably the best that the Big East will be in years from now on. So I've got Xavier as an overrated team. All right, now this is a little bit more fun. The most underrated team in this tournament. Luke, who do you have?
I know I'm a little biased, but I'm going to take the Indiana Hoosiers. I think it's wrong that they're a 5 seed. I think they should be more in the 4-3 range, but kind of the opposite team of Virginia that I talked about earlier is an overrated team. Great offensive team, a little bit shaky defensively. Definitely earlier on in the year they were shaky, but they have fixed that a little bit. They've looked great on defense, and obviously Yogi Ferrell leading this team, guys like Troy Williams and Robert Johnson as well. I think when the defense is clicking for Indiana, they're capable of beating anyone in this field.
Nick?
I'm going to go with the other team from Indiana, Purdue, as the 5 seed. They've performed all season long. They've got 3 big men in Haas, Swanigan, and
Hammonds, of course. Yeah.
sorry, I always get mixed up with them.
Yeah, that's the thing about Purdue. They have no guards, but they've got so many big men. It's hard to almost mix them up.
They're a very deep team.
Yeah, that's for sure. And for my underrated team, I've got a few. I've got Kentucky because they've won their conference championship against Texas A&M. Very good team. They've got wins over Duke, and they've got the best recruiting class of years past. So I've got them as one of my underrated teams. Obviously, they're a 4 seed, so they're definitely up there in the committee's eyes. And I also have Providence. I do like Chris Dunn. He's an NBA-ready guard. And Oregon State, Gary Payton Jr., as we mentioned earlier, son of the glove, Gary Payton. I like that team as well. That's all for this segment. We'll be right back after the break. Hello and welcome back to Bracket Breakdown. I'm your host, Max Abrahamson. Still along with me is Nick and Luke. Now we're going to go over the top coaches in this tournament. Everyone talks about the top teams, but you got to have a mind behind these teams. Luke, who's one of your top coaches in this tournament?
I think Tom Izzo for sure from Michigan State is one of them. The guy's a Final Four machine. I think he's got another Final Four run in him. He's been there for a while. Obviously done great things for Michigan State. I think he can do it again this year for sure.
Nick, I know you have a little bit of a sleeper as a coach. Doesn't come to everyone's mind. Who do you have here?
Everyone lists Tom Izzo, Coach K, Roy Williams, John Calipari, but I really like Greg Marshall as Wichita State's coach. He's led them to be an underdog team the past few years. They made that Final Four run, and I think that he's just done a very good job at leading this team and showing them the way and just making them better players than they were when they came into college.
I'm going to take the Kansas coach, Bill Self. Obviously, Kansas has had a great year. They're sitting at 30-4, winning their past 14 games, and obviously he's great at home. The one problem about the NCAA tournament, all these games are going to be played at neutral sites. Their first game is going to have to be played in Iowa. Pretty reasonable traveling there for Kansas fans. And then their regional will be in Kentucky. So luckily they don't have Kentucky or Louisville. Obviously Louisville didn't make the tournament due to NCAA reasons, but they have a home court advantage in a way. Kansas fans travel great. All right, let's move on to some tournament snubs. Obviously, there's a few snubs every year. This one, I think, more so than any other year. I disagree with Syracuse and Tulsa being in the field of 68 solely based on their strength of schedule, what conference they're in. Obviously, Syracuse is in a great conference, but they did lose to St. John's. I think that St. Bonaventure should have been in there, the Bonnies. They lost in the semifinals of their conference tournament. They're 28th in the RPI, which that's way up there. And we saw some of these teams, they've got sub 60 or higher than 60 RPI, so that's not good for those of you at home. And of course, I also think Monmouth should have been in there. They can't do anything about their conference. They're stuck there. You're going to play who you have to play.
Right.
But they tried so hard to schedule quality opponents outside, non-conference. You have to applaud that effort. And some of their losses aren't bad losses. Obviously, they beat USC earlier, beat Notre Dame. They're a dangerous team. So I was a little bit upset that they didn't get in. Obviously, you gotta love their bench. I mean, they go crazy after every three-pointer. But people look at them as a bench. You got to look at them as a basketball team. They should have been in the field of 68. All right, let's move on to our brackets. I know that we revealed some of our picks for the round of 64 and the round of 32. Luke, give us your Sweet 16 on.
All right, I'll start up in the top left in that South region. I got Kansas playing Maryland. I like Kansas, the 1 seed, advancing there. And right below that, I got Wichita State, one of my Cinderella teams, playing Villanova. I think the 2 seed Villanova will win that matchup. Down in the West, I got Oregon playing Baylor. I think Baylor got lots of size. I think they can play well with that 1 seed Oregon team. I think they'll take that one and move on to the Elite Eight. Down at the bottom of that West region, Texas A&M versus Oklahoma, a big an ACC or SEC team against a Big 12 team there. I think Buddy Hield is going to lead Oklahoma to a victory there. Moving on to the Midwest region, Michigan State playing Seton Hall. I got Michigan State in that one. UVA, Iowa State. I got UVA going on to play Michigan State. And then up in the East region, UNC playing Indiana. I think UNC will take that one. And then West Virginia playing Wisco. I got West Virginia ending Wisco's run there. And my Final Four teams, up in the South, I got Kansas moving on to the Final Four. In the East to UNC. In the Midwest to Michigan State. And Oklahoma in the West region. And I think Kansas will play Michigan State ultimately in the title game, and I got the 1 seed Kansas taking it home.
All right, Nick, Luke, great picks, by the way. I really like them. Nick, what's your bracket look like?
I'll start up in the top left corner of the South as well. In the Sweet 16, I've got the 1 seed playing 5 Maryland, and I have Kansas moving on from that one. And then right below that, I have number 2 Villanova playing Wichita State, and I have Villanova moving on from that one. Down low in the West, we have Oregon playing Duke. I have Oregon coming out of that one with a W. And then underneath that, I have the number 6 seed Texas playing Buddy Hield and the Sooners. I have Sooners moving on there. Moving up to the East region, I have the Tar Heels playing Kentucky. I have Kentucky losing to UNC in that one. And then West Virginia against Xavier. I think that West Virginia will move on from that one. Then down in the Midwest, got UVA beating Purdue. Seton Hall, number 6 seed, even though they were hot, I have them losing to the powerhouse Michigan State. Moving on to the Elite Eight, I have Kansas beating Villanova, my bad. And then down in the West region, Oregon against Oklahoma. Oklahoma coming out of that one. Buddy Hield, can't lie. And then UVA against Michigan State. Although Virginia is the 1 seed, I think that Michigan State will come out of that one with Denzel Valentine's leadership. And then we have the Tar Heels versus West Virginia. I struggled with this one quite a bit, but I think that the press of West Virginia will get to UNC. Marcus Page has been struggling a little bit this season. I think that West Virginia will ultimately overcome them. So Final Four, we got Kansas, Oklahoma, Michigan State, and West Virginia. Kansas, Oklahoma, I have the 1 seed coming out of that one and playing Michigan State in the championship. And I have the number 1 seed, Kansas, winning it all.
Great picks, Nick. All right, my bracket looks quite the same as theirs. Kansas against Cal. I like Kansas. Size is too much for Cal. The U against Iowa. I like the U. Iowa's run comes to the end. Oregon against Duke. Tough matchup here, but I like Oregon's size down low as Duke's injury deprived there. A&M OU. Oklahoma, obviously. I like Buddy Hield and them. I just feel like A&M's inexperience will be against them in this matchup. All right, Seton Hall, MSU, Michigan State in that one. Virginia against Iowa State. I'm going to take the upset here, take Iowa State. I'm just not convinced about Virginia just because they're inconsistent on the offensive end. West Virginia against Wisco, baby. I've got West Virginia here. I feel like the press is just going to be a little bit too much for the Wisconsin guards. UNC, Kentucky. I have Kentucky in this one. That's one of my upsets in here. I just feel like Kentucky is one of the few teams that can match up pretty well against UNC. Moving on to the Elite Eight. Kansas against the U. I've got Kansas. Oregon against Oklahoma. I've got Oklahoma taking down the 1 seed. And then Iowa State against Michigan State. Michigan State coming out there. Kentucky against West Virginia. I've got West Virginia. So my Final Four looks like this. Kansas, Oklahoma, West Virginia against Michigan State. So I've got no 1 seeds in my Final Four, or only one seed in my Final Four, pardon me. But Kansas against Oklahoma. Kansas has beat Oklahoma twice before, and this game will be played in Houston, so it will be closer for Oklahoma to travel to. However, I do like Kansas. They've got the experience against this team. And then West Virginia against Michigan State. I think this will be a great matchup, and I hope this plays out because these two teams match up really nice against each other. But in the end, I think that Michigan State's experience of making the Final Four last year will send them to the championship game where they will ultimately lose to Kansas. I've got Kansas as your national champion of the March Madness 2016. So all of us in consensus, we've got Kansas winning it all, along with Michigan State as the national runner-up. I know that these two teams could go either way. I've heard them flipped and flopped all over the place. ESPN, they've got these two as the favorites, and then among others, they've got Oregon and Duke and Kentucky and North Carolina. They each received 1 vote. However, Kansas, Michigan State, Kansas. That's how I see it in the end. Kansas would finish with 36 wins, which that's one heck of a season. It's 90% winning percentage. Obviously, the magic of March is well here. The games will be played. Upsets will happen. Cheerleaders will cry. Same with young fans in the stands. The magic of March should be a national holiday. The way that it brings out emotion in fans, communities, colleges, alumni, second to none. That's why March has to be the best sporting, March Madness, best sporting event in college sports. Cross it off, pro sports. All of sports, by far the best 3 weeks of the year.
I agree, Max.
Totally.
For Nick Jacobs and Luke Lusson, I'm your host, Max Abrahamson.